Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for the LifeSciences BC Showcase Series, Prince George. We are now going to begin. I'm just waiting. A few of our speakers are just joining us on stage here, so that's great. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ryan Bunt. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Events with LifeSciences BC, and we are very excited to have everybody here virtually. We do miss going to Prince George, although I heard somebody was telling us there was snow today, so we may have dodged that one. But we had a great time, Wendy and I, last year, meeting with all of our stakeholders up there, and so we do look forward to getting back up there once all of COVID is gone. So I'm here just to do, as Wendy likes to tease me, a flight attendant announcement of a few key housekeeping things before we get started. So we would want to just let you know about the chat function. So if you have any comments or thoughts or congratulations or a good, interesting presentation, please put those in the chat. If you're watching anybody's slides and you want to see it full screen, just toggle to the top right of your screen and you see 4 arrows. It will then say full screen, and then you're able to go full screen to see the slides as they're presented there. For the Q&A, you just click on there and you can ask questions as the people are doing their presentations. There is a nice little upvote function. So if you see a question and you really enjoy that, you can just keep upvoting it as we go along. And at the end, we're going to have networking, and we'll have 3 rounds of 8 minutes each. Now, during that, you double click on the table that you would like to join. Now, sometimes if it doesn't work, it could be because that table is full. And sometimes also there could be a little glitch, so you could just go to another table. But we do ask you to please wait until the after the 8 minutes before moving tables, because it can be a little distracting for people to come in and out as you go along there. Also, we have sponsor areas there. So if you'd like to go meet any of our sponsors, please click in their little area and you can meet them during the break as well. So we encourage you to do that. And also, if you have not done so, can you please upload your photo and your social media links, because it just makes it a little bit easier for people to find you at the particular tables. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Wendy Herbert, our President and CEO, who will do the welcome and introduce all of our speakers today. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. We are excited to be here. This is our 4th annual Prince George Showcase. And well, we're hosting it, so to speak. And sorry to not be there in person. As Ryan said, we really enjoyed our time there last year. We are excited that we've got a lot of people from outside of Prince George joining us. So instead of us coming to Prince George, we're now bringing Prince George to the rest of BC. So that's really exciting. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining this event from the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Most of our Prince George speakers are joining us from the traditional territory of the Katli-Tene, part of Kayla Carrier First Nations. And I apologize if I didn't pronounce that perfectly. Somebody can correct me if I didn't in the break. I'd also like to acknowledge that others are joining us from other traditional and unceded Indigenous territories across this beautiful province and country. So welcome, everyone. For those of you that do not know, LifeSciences BC is a non-governmental, not-for-profit organizations. Our members consist of academia, research institutions, centers of excellence and funding agencies, and emerging and small and medium growing digital health, medtech, and therapeutics companies. And we're super excited to bring everyone together at all of our events and within our community. We're unique in the sense of we really are the place where in British Columbia, the life sciences community gathers. We found that during COVID-19, our role of doing this has increased substantially as we can't meet in person. So we pivoted very quickly to host virtual events. And we're happy to be doing this today with Prince George. This event is made possible by the support of our generous sponsors. So today and the full showcase series is sponsored by the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research, Clinical Trials BC, Silicon Valley Bank, and with additional support from the University of Northern British Columbia. So thank you, all of you. Your investment and support of our ecosystem is invaluable and is what enables us to do these types of events. So with that, one of the things we do is we always introduce our newest members. So I think Ryan is going to show a slide, which I actually can't see very well. But our newest members are Silicon Valley Bank, Shackelford, Metamor Health, and Fusion Genomics. Sorry, because of all the people, I can't actually see the slide, so apologies. I don't think I pronounced that properly. Anyway, if you'd like to, if you're interested in membership, many of the LSBC people are here today, and please have us, or you can get membership information on our website. So now on to the program. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Julia Bickford. Julia is the Regional Director of Research, Evaluation, and Analytics at Northern Health Authority and the co-lead of the BC Support Unit, Northern Centre. In these roles, Julia works in partnership with a variety of stakeholders to develop capacity and infrastructure in the North in support of a high-quality, evidence-based healthcare system. Julia has a PhD in Health and Rehabilitation Sciences and a master's degree in Medical Anthropology. She holds an Innovation Fellowship at the Institute for Health System Solutions and Virtual Care, Women's College Hospital. Recent work has focused on digital health research and evaluation, knowledge mobilization, as well as cultural safety and Indigenous experiences of healthcare. So I will now pass it off to Julia to give her presentation. I'll be moderating a Q&A just after, so if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A tab. Over to you, Julia.
All right, are you able to see my screen? Sorry about that.
We can see your screen, which is the Remo screen.
Oh.
I see your slides.
So I have my presentation up on my screen. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Unshare and then try sharing again.
Okay.
And here comes technical support, Ryan.
Sorry about this, guys.
You just have to remember to click on the application when it's not your screen. You're sharing your screen, but you're doing the application.
So let me know. Did this work? Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. So I can see my slides, but I'm not sure if you guys can.
Yeah. So when you just go to the share the screen, they'll come up and then it'll say application, and then you just click on your PowerPoint there.
And for some reason, my PowerPoint is not coming up as an option, even though it's open on my screen. So just a second. I apologize that this is.
That's okay. It's fine.
Okay, this may.
Yep, there you go.
Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry about that, you guys. Well, thank you so much, Wendy, for your introduction. So my name is Julia Bickford. I am the Regional Director of Research, Evaluation, and Analytics at Northern Health, and I'm really pleased to be here on the unceded territory of the Clébé-Téné, where I live, work, and play in this beautiful part of our province. So today, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of who we are at Northern Health, a background into some of our research projects, and it may be an update from last year when you came to the North. And then also wanted to give you an update on some things that we're doing at Northern Health to help build our capacity and our infrastructure to support future research in the North. So I thought I'd start. I'm not sure, this is my first time at this event, and I wasn't sure exactly who would be joining and if there were people who may not be familiar with our Northern Health region. So just wanted to give you that little bit of context before we dive in. So our region is really large. It's over half of the province. It only serves 300,000 people, so a fairly small population over a really large land mass. We also have 54 First Nations in our region. The services that we provide at Northern Health are acute care, mental health and addictions, public health, home and community care, and we have 7,000 employees that support those services. But I think it's really important to understand the context of the North when we're talking about research. And so this next slide you can see as well, our health authority is divided into 3 different health service delivery areas. So there's the Northeast, which goes all the way up to the Northwest Territories and over in the east to Alberta. The Northwest, which goes up to the Yukon and includes Haida Gwaii on the west coast. And then the Central Interior, which goes down almost to Williams Lake. So the reason I'm stressing this is just that I think it's really important when we think about research to think about the context in which it's taking place. And we at Northern Health really want to partner with researchers and be part of designing those projects and identifying the research questions that are important and that matter to the North in order to make sure that the solutions that are identified will really work in the North and be appropriate for the Northern context. So I think that's just an important point for doing research in the North. So Northern Health really works to promote excellence in every service by integrating research and evidence into practice. And our research department, which is fairly new, so my position is a brand new position. I've been here for about 7 months at Northern Health. And prior to that, this is a new journey for us to dive into research in this way and really have some dedicated supports for it. So we really want to support our staff and physicians, patients, and our academic partners to conduct or engage in research activities that advance the priorities of Northern Health. And again, there's lots of interesting research that we could do, but we want to do research that's really going to be actionable and meaningful for the North. This slide is just to give you a bit of an overview of some of our key partners and stakeholders in research. So you can see in terms of principal investigators, this data is from last year as of 2019. So 55% of our principal investigators that do research with Northern Health are from UBC, but that includes the Northern Medical Program, family practice, and pharmacy residents here as well. And then obviously University of Northern British Columbia is a really important partner as well. You can see in the red there, Providence Healthcare, and then you can see some other institutions who are also partnering with Northern Health in research. And the other inset circle here is just looking at CIHR themes. So what types of research are we doing at Northern Health or have we been engaged in the past? Predominantly health services research. 62% of our studies that were done in 2019 was health services. You can see in the red, there's pop and public health, and then clinical research is that green area there, and that little sliver is biomedical research. So primarily we've been involved in health services research in the past. I think we're going to be hearing from Dr. Olson later this morning, and he is probably responsible for much of that green piece in the pie there. So I wanted to give just a few examples of the types of research that Northern Health has been involved in. So the Northern Biobank Initiative, and then also the Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research. There's a lot of other research projects that we have been involved in as well, and Shannon Freeman is going to be speaking after this, and she's been a really key research partner for us at Northern Health, but I knew she was speaking, so she can highlight her work for you after this. The Northern Biobank, there's a number of different things that kind of helped enable this vision to become a reality. And so one, as we spoke of before when we were looking at those maps, is really the unique demographics and the distinct environment and geography in the North. There's a need to shift away from this over-reliance on generalizability in biomedical research. So when results are obtained in large metropolitan centers, they're expected to hold true in rural and remote Indigenous settings, and that may not be the case. There's a general lack of access to cutting-edge medical research and clinical trials for Northern residents, and just underdeveloped research infrastructure that puts rural and remote areas out of favor for a lot of scientists. So considering this, and with a lot of consultation with communities for several years, lots of consultation with Indigenous communities, bioethicists, healthcare professionals, and researchers, there was a decision to establish a biomedical research platform that comprises breast cancer tissue specimens and the clinical data associated with those specimens. And this has been carried out by Dr. Nadine Caron. She's the lead principal investigator on this project. And the funding, we want to acknowledge the funding sources: Genome BC, BC Cancer, Northern Health, First Nations Health Authority, and PHSA as well. So this is just an update on where the retrospective biobank is at. There's 1,100 clinical cases of breast cancer and 2,000 tissue specimens. They've also, so these specimens include the clinical data that is associated with those specimens, and they cover an 8-year period of breast cancer diagnostics and treatment that's specific to the Northern Health region. And then obviously there's research health ethics approval that covers the retrospective biobank, but that can be amended so that external biomedical researchers can use these resources. So one thing that's really important is now that we have this retrospective breast cancer biobank, it's really created some infrastructure and processes so that it can support future cancer research in Northern Health. And right now we're working on, with the Northern Biobank Initiative, moving towards a prospective biobank. So that's really exciting. And so we're just kind of developing that infrastructure and going through all of those ethics processes for that as well, which is very exciting. So just switching gears here, I wanted to give another example of some of the research that we've been involved in Northern Health. So you can see our Northern Health values there are empathy, respect, collaboration, and innovation. And when we think about our industry partners and the life sciences, probably collaboration and innovation are two really important aspects to keep in mind here. So when we think about person and family-centered care, this is a really key approach to Northern Health, and it really underpins everything from planning, delivery of care, evaluation of those health services, and it's grounded in mutually beneficial partnerships among the healthcare providers, the patients and clients, and their families. And it really does redefine the relationships in healthcare, which can lead to better health outcomes and a better allocation of resources and greater individual and family satisfaction. So you can see our vision for patient-oriented research really draws on that definition and is really to have patients who are active partners in health research that will lead to improved health outcomes and enhanced healthcare system. So our patient-oriented research team is part of the BC Support Unit Northern Centre. So I'm the co-lead of that centre along with Rachel Wells at UNBC. And so the first phase of this SPORE funding through CIHR was from 2016 to 2021. And in that time, we've developed and funded 12 different patient partner co-led teams and funded 4 trainees to undertake patient-oriented research training and graduate research. And Northern Health has also partnered on 10 external grant applications that were focused on patient-oriented approaches. I just wanted to include this slide to give you an overview of some of the patient-oriented research projects we have ongoing, and in particular, drawing your attention to the right-hand column, which shows our patient partners who are obviously really crucial and integral to this research. And lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we are building research and capacity and infrastructure within Northern Health. In particular, right now, we're focusing on clinical research, which we really haven't had a lot of capacity or infrastructure to support in the past. And the reason why this is so important is, number one, health equity, right? So by enabling clinical research to happen in the North, we're really expanding the number of treatment options that are available to people in the North. And so they're able to access these investigational therapeutics without having to drive to Vancouver or somewhere far away from their homes. And what I'm trying to really stress in our organization is that research is not external to care provision, it's really part of good quality care. And so we should be thinking that, all of us within Northern Health have a role to play within research. And the second reason why I think that enabling and developing capacity and infrastructure around clinical research in particular is just workforce sustainability. So we know that in the North, it can be difficult to attract and retain clinicians. And so by offering this supportive environment for them to pursue their research interests, we're really hoping that it has a positive impact on our workforce. And I know Bev Holmes is speaking later this morning, but I wanted to acknowledge the amazing support of the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research. So earlier during this pandemic, in the early summer, they came out with an award for health authorities to make sure that they were able to continue to engage in research during the pandemic, knowing that our workforce is really strained and being pulled in different directions because of this pandemic. So this award has been incredibly helpful for Northern Health. And through this funding, we were able to hire our first clinical research coordinator, which is just phenomenal for us. We really can't have clinical research happening off the side of people's desks. You have to have that dedicated support. And so this has been just really, really helpful for Northern Health. Our clinical research coordinator starts in 2 weeks from now, and so she's really going to be able to help us develop our standard operating procedures and our research policies and really get our processes in place that will really support investigators to conduct their research in a timely way. So just acknowledging Michael Smith Foundation. That was really what I wanted to share with you. We are really open and interested in partnering with industry. And so if anyone wants to get in contact with me, I have put my email address up there as well. But happy to open up for questions or discussion. Oh, I also wanted to acknowledge, sorry, Bree Orser is a very talented photographer on our BC support unit team. And so many of the photographs in this presentation were from Bree's phone.
I noticed that the pictures were great, actually. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. And a reminder to everybody who's listening: if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and I'm monitoring that as our speakers are speaking. One of the things I was really struck with last year, and you've completely reinforced it in your presentation, is the uniqueness of being in Northern Health because of the vast geography and how spread out the population is, which is obviously very different from, major urban centers. And when we met with Northern Health last year, I walked away with a feeling that Northern Health was leading the charge and being very innovative in how health services are being delivered. And so you just talked a lot about that. And so I'm going to walk away with the amazing innovation that comes out of it. And one of the areas that I think is really interesting is how you manage data. Because especially during a pandemic where people are not able to move around a lot, you seem to have really been able to crack the nut on having data portability with the patients. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm not sure if I'm the right person to talk about our data portability. I do know that there's a number of innovations that are taking place right now in the North, and that our clinicians are working really hard around some of the virtual care options that are available for patients. And so obviously data underpinning that is a really important component of that, with our EMRs and making sure that everyone has seamless access to patient data so that we can provide that continuity of care. So certainly I would say the pandemic has been a great, has spurred on a lot of innovation and really moved things forward quite a bit faster than they would have otherwise, I think, in that area of virtual care and the data that needs to support that.
And it seemed to me in our meetings last year that you are likely able to have done that because you were starting from already a very integrated system. So your patient-centered research, that's super exciting. We actually had Dr. Carone speak at this event last year, and so it was great to hear an update on where that's going. How has it been during a pandemic to recruit patients through kicking this off?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that it's strained, right? Like recruiting patients for research and even just research in general during a pandemic can be a challenge, just to be totally honest, right? So our healthcare providers are pretty stretched and pretty strained, and so trying to keep research on the agenda is something that is a constant, needs to constantly be attended to in order to make sure that patients are being recruited. I think there is a lot of interest in the North, though, and I think patients are interested in research. So we'll have to see as the pandemic unfolds, and I think it's a little bit challenging for me to answer the question because I just started at Northern Health right at the very beginning of the pandemic, so I don't really have a good sense of how things were pre-pandemic actually. But if there are, others in the conference and the audience who are part of Northern Health or part of the North, please feel free to jump in as well if this is a discussion point.
Well, it's wonderful to see that your position, what you're doing, and as I say, I really applaud Northern Health for the innovation that you really are leading the charge in some areas for the province. So with that, I'm going to move to our next speaker. So that is Dr. Heath Matheson, who will be joining me on this virtual stage in a few moments. Dr. Matheson is a theoretically motivated experimental psychologist pursuing the idea that cognition is embodied, that thinking arises from the brain-body environment interactions in this service action. Using brain imaging techniques of cognitive neuroscience, his lab tests hypothesis about the role of the body and embodied experience in diverse domains with psychology and cognitive science. In his lab, they ask both basic research questions and the nature of the mind, brain, and more applied questions, where embodied research has application in education and health, including understanding the causes of disorder and identifying targets for intervention. With this approach, he ultimately seeks to discover how embodiment shapes the organization of brain and behavior. So, looking forward to your talk. I will hand it over to you now.
Perfect. Great. There we go. Just a couple of buttons. So hopefully I'm coming through okay and everything seems all right. And thank you for the introduction, and thank you for everyone's opening comments, providing context for our meeting here. So I'm going to take a few minutes, and I just want to introduce myself and introduce a type of research that I'm seeking to establish at my lab at UNBC. And the general theme is neuroscience in the North, and so I'm going to elaborate on what this means. So I just want to start off by getting us to think about big problems and the notion that big problems require really creative solutions. So, we have climate change. This is a problem, something that many researchers are interested in the North. We have things like largest economic crash we've experienced in recent memory. And of course, it goes without saying, we have things like global crisis in the form of a pandemic. And in thinking about problems like the pandemic, we often tend to think of this as an issue associated with a virus, which it very much is, but it's also a problem of human behavior, and how do we get people to wash their hands and not meet in overcrowded groups and wear masks, etc. So who am I, and what am I trying to do to address these big problems? Well, just very briefly, I trained as an experimental psychologist, so I'm interested in psychology and the science of behavior. I did my undergrad at the University of Winnipeg. I went on to graduate studies at Dalhousie University in Halifax. And then I did postdoctoral research at the University of Pennsylvania for 3 years before I was hired on at UNBC. And the whole time I've been interested in this thing, the human brain, often touted as the most complex piece of organized matter in the universe. And because of my training in experimental psychology with an interest in the human brain, this means that I've really focused on a specialization called cognitive neuroscience. And so what is cognitive neuroscience? Well, one way to answer this question is to think about levels of analysis when we're trying to solve particular problems. And we could think of molecular science or cellular science. So this is an image of a neuron here. And we could go all the way up to an institutional level. This is a picture of the Bank of Canada, for instance. And then there's everything in between. There's a level of analysis that involves studying groups. There's a level of analysis that involves studying human behavior in context. And then we could use different techniques to actually look at people's brains in action. And then there's sort of the computational and network aspect of explaining brain activity. And so cognitive neuroscience kind of spans the mid-range here from computation to human behavior. And in a nutshell, it's the study of the relationship between brain and behavior. And so sometimes this is called a systems level analysis for understanding problems. And so in thinking about big problems and creative solutions, what does cognitive neuroscience try to do? Well, cognitive neuroscience, for the most part, is after very basic questions about human thought. Questions like, how do we understand language? How do we remember things? How do we plan? And two questions that I've been particularly interested in throughout my research career is, how do we learn? How do we learn new information? And how do we take that new information that we've learned and creatively solve problems with it? So it's really about acquiring knowledge and manipulating that knowledge to solve problems. And of course, because of my interest in the brain, I'm asking, how does the brain do this? So there are many ways that we can measure brain activity in living humans as they engage in problem solving. The technique that I've been focusing on at UNBC is called electroencephalography, or EEG. And so some of us probably have come across this technique, but if you haven't, the idea is that we can put embedded in a cap on people's heads a bunch of silver electrodes, and these electrodes are passive, but because each electrode is over a different part of the brain and the brain's generating electrical chemical activity, we could actually measure the electrical changes that are happening through the scalp with these electrodes. And so each electrode results in a recording of brain waves, shown here in this image as these traces. And what we can do is we could show people things or get people to solve problems. That's what I'm calling stimulus here. And then we could look at the activity around those events when people are looking at pictures and solving problems. And then we could average them, and we could get a sense statistically of what the brain's doing. So down here, we just have on the y-axis the microvolt change, the electrical change in the brain over time, where the line reflects the moment of a problem being solved or a stimulus being shown. And then the EEG trace is characterized by positive and negative changes, and the changes have peaks named for whether they're positive or negative and the order that they occur. Another way to look at this is a schematic. You can imagine looking down on a person's head here. This is a person's nose, these are the ears, and we could actually get a record of the complete topology of the activity change while people solve problems. And so in my lab, we have one of these systems, and I've said my lab is under construction. We have started doing research, but we are just starting the process of building a new space, a space dedicated for this type of research. And we do very simple things. And I just want to try to give us a taste for what kind of experiments we run and what kind of things we learn. So a lot of the experiments that we run involve having people make statements on pictures of objects or on words. So for instance, here's an array of objects, and I could ask you, which one is the hammer? And you could say, okay, this one's the hammer. And then I could say, well, which one are the artifacts? And you go, okay, well, a hammer's not the only thing that's an artifact. These are all sort of artifacts created by humans compared to these things. And so we're categorizing and we're using concepts that we've learned to make judgments about things out in the world. But lately, we've been particularly interested in using this knowledge creatively. So I could show you an image of a hammer, and rather than saying, what is this, which is very straightforward, I could say, well, what are some creative uses for this? And what I'd like to try to do is just to give us a sense of the challenge that this presents people, is to try to just have some audience participation on this. And the easiest way to do this is, if you're willing and brave enough to share, is to just use the chat box and just type in some creative uses. And in our experiments, we give people 1 minute. So I'd like to give us 1 minute to try to generate as many creative uses for a hammer as we could come up. And there's a couple of important things. Yes, thank you, Sue. But there's a couple of important limitations here. Number one, we can't say anything that relates to its normal use. So if you were to use a hammer to build a table, we want to avoid giving that. We also can't give things that might be a little obvious. So we really want to push ourselves to come up with really creative, novel uses of this hammer. And if you're stuck, sometimes in our experiments, we'll give little hints and we'll say things like, okay, if you're up against a wall, you could think of disassembling or taking apart the hammer and then using it in different ways. So yes, people are giving us examples. So I'll stop talking for a couple of seconds here to see what else we could come up with. There we go. I like this stamp one in particular. Yeah, nice. Use it for. Oh, this is a good one. So these are all great, and hopefully you're getting a sense of, well, as we go, we might be able to generate 1 or 2 sort of initially, but then it gets really, really difficult. Oh, potato masher, that's very nice. And it gets very, very difficult. Oh yeah, there we go. If the metal end will be cold, especially since it's cold out right now. Right, so hopefully this gives us a sense of how this is a case study of the larger issue, which is how do we take information that we know and we have, and how do we manipulate and combine it in new ways to give us creative solutions to problems. So the process that we're engaging here is really an example of the process that we need to engage in to solve some of our bigger problems. Yeah, a massage, very nice. Yes, thank you, thank you. So in doing this type of research, what do we learn? Well, we learn, I suggest that our research has, we ask a lot of basic fundamental questions, but it has many implications. We learn about strategies for problem solving. So every time we do one of these studies, we're gaining insight into what sort of things might work in the future if we're sitting down at a table and trying to solve a particular problem. The skills that we're learning about are applicable to any domain in which humans solve problems, which is essentially every domain. So there's lots of implications for education, mental health, and just anything that involves research more generally. Now we study the brain, so I'm interested in what the neural data offer us. And by looking at the brain, we actually learn something about how to increase efficiency in problem solving and how to increase creativity by virtue of looking into something that we normally can't see. And then, of course, I'm biased, and I'm going to say, well, there's nothing more practical than understanding our own brains. We really are at a stage where we're learning an incredible amount about the brain every day, but we're still far from having a complete picture of what that looks like. So we're sort of imprisoned by our own ignorance as to what's going on in our skulls. And what I want to emphasize here for neuroscience in the North is that a big benefit of pushing for this idea is that is one of capacity building. And right now there isn't a lot of opportunities for students who might be interested in these types of questions to get training. And so by working with me and my colleagues, students get a high quality training in human neuroscience. They learn the fundamentals of how to study human behavior, which is of course applicable to any psychological question that people have, including things like questions related to behavior around a pandemic. They learn medically relevant technology, EEG in particular. This is the technology that's used for diagnosing a lot of brain disorders, medically, epilepsy included, and they learn how to use this tech and use it properly. And they also gain complex data analysis skills, and I say the most with a question mark because it's very common for us to think, well, yes, the economy is very complex and the weather is very complex, but the brain is also very complex. And so by getting data from the brain and training people to use it, we gain a great amount of skill handling complex data, not just brain data. So I just want to quickly touch on two avenues for the future of research that we've been looking at, which I think has particular relevance for the North. The first is cannabis. And so cannabis has recently been legalized in Canada, and there's been lots of research on sort of the medical benefits of cannabis, but much less is known about just the cognitive consequences of cannabis use. And of course, there's a lot of sort of common sense ideas about cannabis. Depending on who you ask, it makes you really, really dumb, or it makes you really, really creative. But we don't quite know. And so we're currently applying for a research license for cannabis, and the idea is we're going to bring people in, give them some cannabis, administer cannabis, and then have them solve some of our problems and do some of our thinking tasks. And so we'll answer questions like, how does cannabis affect cognition? How does the brain change under cannabis intoxication? And how do the changes in brain function impact learning and creative problem solving with this substance? And finally, one thing that we're really trying to explore is equipping ourselves with mobile EEG technology. So there are a few companies who have developed technology that allows us to take the EEG technique, move it outside of the lab, put it on people, and allow them to move around freely in their environment. And so there's kind of a range of products available for this that vary in expense from $1,000 a headset to a couple $100 a headset, and they vary in the complexity too. So here's an example which is sort of a mid-range complexity where you'd get really nice information from people engaging in tasks in the real world, but you could get really simple headsets as well, where you're not getting as much brain data as you would in the lab, but you can still get a lot of useful brain data. So the idea with neuroscience in the North is that by equipping ourselves with this mobile technology, we'll be able to sort of take it out into the world and out of the lab at UNBC. And this addresses some of the issues that Julia was just talking about overgeneralization in science and about barriers to learning and access to learning in terms of the remoteness that we see in northern BC. And the idea is simply much of human neuroscience comes from urban centers with well-educated people in universities doing tasks on computers, etc. But here we'll be able to bring this technology out into the world, have people engage in learning within a community context or in an ecological context. And we really think that there's a lot to be learned there. Pardon me. And finally, in doing so too, it won't just enhance sort of our understanding of the brain in terms of the science of the brain, but it will allow us to engage in a type of scientific outreach as well and bring techniques and technologies to places where they might not otherwise be. Oh, pardon me, sorry. And allow people to have experiences and sort of participate in the development of neuroscience in the North. So thank you very much. I would just like to thank funding sources and, of course, students and colleagues at UNBC.
Thank you very much. That was super interesting and kind of fun to think of different uses of a hammer. So I find what you were talking about very interesting. And as you say, in light of the times of a pandemic, when we're all pivoting constantly, to what extent is the pandemic affecting your research and how you're conducting it?
Yeah, so initially it has ground it to a halt just because there was a lot of uncertainty about how we should, what account. So let me say that for EEG research, there's interaction between people. You have to put the cap on their head, and so you're engaging And so it ground to a halt, but universities everywhere and research labs everywhere have sort of developed COVID safety plans. So we expect to be up and running very soon. And that would be the case whether in our lab at UNBC or out in the community. But the biggest impact, and something that is being discussed, is the fact that we've now sort of entered a situation where many people are chronically stressed. We've been stressed for a very long time. And so there's sort of a developing narrative that suggests any of the science that we're doing right now under this context is really, problem solving in a pandemic context, that the stress that is occurring is going to really contextualize everything that we're learning about the brain. So this really does shape how we approach questions and how we interpret what we see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how that will feed into it, because to a certain extent, everybody has been operating on some level of alert since this pandemic started, and everybody's in a different place at a different time, and how you factor that into the research as you're doing will be very interesting over time.
Indeed.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next speaker and look forward to chatting with you more, Dr. Matheson, during the networking. I'd now like to introduce Bev Holmes, who's the president and CEO of the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research. Michael Smith Foundation has been a big supporter of our showcase series across the province, and it's a privilege to have you with us today, Bev. So I'll hand it over to you to introduce the next speaker.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Hello from my home in Vancouver on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Thanks to LifeSciences BC for organizing a great event that really shines a spotlight on research and life sciences in Prince George and in the north. And thanks to Julia and Heath for the great presentations. And I'll just say that my team at the Michael Smith Foundation is so pleased to be part of this vibrant community. We're looking forward, like you, Wendy, to our next real visit to Prince George and to the north, but virtual connection is actually working just fine in the meantime. And for those of you who might not know the foundation, a few words: we're BC's health research funding agency, and we by the provincial government. And our main focus is health research talent development. So we help attract, retain, recruit the talent that BC needs to advance knowledge, to make sure that evidence is moving into products and services and policy and practice, and also to strengthen the economy. Or Heath, I liked your words, help people come up with creative solutions to big problems. So in a province as large and geographically diverse as BC, and Julia, you really highlighted the reality in the north. That was fascinating. It's important for us to support researchers who are focused on the priorities of local communities and who are building capacity in those communities and who are really putting those communities on the world stage. So we're proud to say that since our inception, we have invested nearly $11 million through 39 awards to researchers in the north. And at the same time as we're saying we're proud of that, we actually want to grow those numbers. We want to increase the regional diversity of our funding programs, including support for researchers in the north. So to that end, we're implementing process changes to our scholar and trainee programs aimed at improving the success of more applicants from around the province. And those changes have very much been informed by what we've heard from you and people in other regions around the province. The guidelines for those programs have just been announced, and the applications will open next week. So those are two of our programs. So please visit our website or our social media channels to find out more. And on the note of our scholar program, it is my pleasure to introduce one of our most recently funded scholars, 2020 MSFHR Age Well Scholar, Dr. Shannon Freeman, who's going to talk to us about bridging the technology gap to better support aging in Northern BC. And Dr. Freeman, or Shannon, is the recipient of a partnered award between our foundation and the national organization Age Well, which is a really clever acronym for aging gracefully across environments using technology to support wellness, engagement, and long life. We're really grateful to Age Well for partnering with us to provide additional funding for Shannon's work. Shannon is Associate Professor in the School of Nursing at the University of Northern BC, Academic Director of UNBC's Statistics Canada Research Data Centre, and also Academic Director for the newly established Centre for Technology Adoption for Aging in the North. And she holds a PhD in Health Studies and Gerontology, as well as a Master's of Science in Internal Medicine and Rehab Sciences. Shannon, over to you. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Bev, for that lovely introduction. It is my great pleasure to present to everyone today about some of the work that I'm leading at UNBC that really focuses on bridging the technology gap to better support aging in the North. So when I first came to BC and I heard people talk about the unique nature of the North, I thought they were typically mentioning bears and moose. However, no one told me about how different that nature can be, especially that I may have a bear one morning look in my window at me, which is the picture in the middle bottom, and it actually happened to me this past summer. Over the years I've spent in Prince George, I've learned that the unique nature of the North not only applies to animals, it also applies to our aging population across rural and northern communities. As many of you may already be aware, our population is aging. Because we hear it in the news all the time. It is new and uncharted territory for us in Canada. Over the next 20 years, Canada's older adult population, so those who are age 65 years and older, are expected to continue to increase, and this trend will grow by almost 70%. By 2037, they're projecting over 10.4 million Canadians will be aged over 65. And so the aging of the Canadian population will drive an increased need for services and supports. You heard Julia talk a bit about Northern Health. And so I really want to put that in the context of what it means for aging in BC in the North. In 2018, there was over 900,000 older adults in BC, representing about 18% of the population. Our BC Seniors Advocate, Isabel McKenzie, reported overall, our older adult population in BC is generally healthy. 1 in 5 older adults live with high complex chronic conditions, and about 1 in 20 are diagnosed with dementia. From this map, you'll be able to see that the distribution of older adults is unique across different health authorities in BC, which ranges from a high of 24% in Vancouver Island to a low of 13% of the population here in northern BC in the Northern Health Authority region. And while northern BC may have the smallest proportion of older persons compared to other health authorities, it will face significant implications as a result of population aging trends. And it's really important for us to consider, what does this mean to each one of us and to our healthcare system? And we need to consider what this will mean with a smaller population dispersed across a wide geographic area. The chart here shows you the estimates for aging in the Northern Health region where we are, where I'm located. And while we have the smallest proportion of older adults compared to the other health authorities, you can see that by 2035, the number of older adults will have substantially increased. Notably, the proportion of those aged 75 years and greater is expected to exceed the number of older adults who are aged 65 to 74. These projections are really important to help us predict demands to our healthcare system over time. Without changes in how care is provided, the pressures on our long-term care sector and our hospital acute care sector will be enormous and likely unsustainable. So when I look at this kind of chart, I think there's huge opportunity to think differently about how we can offset much of these pressures that we're going to experience by thinking of innovative solutions and considering how we can do things differently. Innovative, new, and creative solutions to help address this incredibly complex challenge of our population aging are emerging to better support provision of timely, high quality, and appropriate care for older adults. Often we think that technologies to support aging continue to be 10 or 15 years down the line. However, in fact, the time is now. We have learned that while the majority of older adults are confident using current technologies and believe that technology can improve their quality of life, the majority of older adults are not using technology to support their health and wellness. And so while there's strong potential to support health, active living, aging in place in rural and northern communities, there's a huge gap in the services and supports that older adults need, can benefit from, serve, and what is actually accessible, feasible, and affordable for older persons who live in the North. In rural and northern communities like ours in northern BC, they often face unique challenges that are unique to geography, population, and resource accessibility. So in starting to put all these pieces together and looking at all the opportunities and also the challenges, I always come back to this image of the Grand Canyon. When I look at the landscape of technology and technology development to support all our adults in aging, I see this huge divide between those who have access and those who don't. And currently across the North and across rural and remote communities, the gap is even larger, just like the Grand Canyon. You can't get from one side to the other without substantial efforts or some good luck. And this is the problem I see. Lots of technology, but how do we get them into the hands of the people who can benefit and use them? Every so often, a bird could fly over this divide, and by some great act of nature, there could be a connection. But this is unpredictable and unstable. You might think about going on a caravan, putting bags on donkeys, camping in the great outdoors, and taking a substantial amount of time to get from one side to the other. But this also takes a lot of effort, strength to survive the elephants, and a degree of luck to not get bitten by a deadly snake or scorpion. But what if we had a bridge? What if we had a way to connect all these technologies to the older persons and stakeholders in the North who could benefit from them? Sometimes when I use this slide, I feel like I'm on an infomercial when I say, you know, there must be another way. And that's where the work that I'm doing and the work with Ctan, the Center for Technology Adoption for Aging in the North, comes in. Through partnerships and collaborations, we're trying to build this bridge here in the North with the establishment of Ctan, which aims to connect those who have or are developing technologies to older adults and health systems in rural and northern communities who can benefit from them. Ctan, the Center for Technology Adoption for Aging in the North, is an innovation hub funded by AgeWell, Northern Health, and UNBC. Ctan's mission is to engage a range of aging and technology stakeholders who are committed to innovation and the adoption of technology-based solutions and supports. Ctan is a collaborating center for innovation in technology development and implementation, and we focus on adapting, piloting, and implementing new and existing technology solutions to help them be tailored to address the challenges experienced by rural and northern communities. Our broad goals at Ctan are to support older adults to continue to live in rural and northern communities with dignity and high quality of life, to develop and implement proactive, upstream, and targeted approaches for technology to enhance service delivery and reduce health infrastructure and acute care costs. We aim to build capacity for technology development, local talent development, and recruitment of businesses to the region. We aim to stimulate the Northern BC economy and set best practices for how to approach technology and aging in rural northern communities. We conducted widespread consultation with researchers, health systems decision makers, healthcare providers, older adults, and caregivers to really identify what are the priorities for supporting older persons to age in the North. Each of these priorities also represents an opportunity to better leverage technology across northern BC. At Ctan, we apply a pipeline approach to our research, testing, and validation studies of age tech in northern and rural context to provide the evidence for stakeholders, set the course for sustainable scaling of age tech in northern and rural communities, build regional, national, and global partnerships, build awareness and outreach of technology and aging, provide training opportunities for age tech leaders of today and tomorrow, and study the health and economic impacts of the adoption of age tech. At Ctan, we help inform companies on the needs and of developing technology that is relevant to those who are aging in the rural and northern context. We provide opportunity for testing and validation studies to establish evidence for adoption and effectiveness. And ultimately, at Ctan, we're focused on supporting and scaling technology through the region and beyond. One of our first projects at Ctan is partnered with SteadyWear. So they've created a glove that helps reduce essential tremors in the hand. And by doing this, it enables a person who has essential tremor to be able to hold a pen or drink out of a glass. Our work brings those gloves to persons in the northern BC, and currently we're examining the ability that use of the glove will have not only to enhance the person's independence and quality of life in conducting activities of daily living, such as eating or dressing, but also to reduce or delay the need for home care or long-term care supports. Another area of our work at Ctan focuses upon the introduction of smart home technologies in northern BC. Imagine this. As an older adult walks into their smart home, there may be floor tiles that collect vital signs such as heart rate and blood pressure and monitor changes in their walking. They may have an intelligent mirror that helps them with tasks such as washing their hands, brushing their teeth, and queuing. They may have a smart TV to also help with queuing and daily reminders. Motion sensors can detect falls and connect older adults to a family member or caregiver in time of emergency. Smart home technologies now allow for combinations of computer vision, pressure, motion, thermal, wearables, audio, and more. Currently, we're working with our partners, including builders, architects, health systems decision makers, and government representatives to support opportunities to in new dementia housing builds into rural communities in northern BC. Here's an example of using a mat under a bed to alert a caregiver or a care provider that an individual has gotten up. In this case, the mat can be connected to Alexa or Google Home for voice prompting, or send a text message to a caregiver to let them know that their loved one has gotten out of bed. These technologies can also link to door sensors and lighting to help cue the individual to go to the washroom if it's in the middle of the night, or cue them to go to the living room if it's in the middle of the afternoon. These technologies can support individuals and also their caregivers. And finally, there's also great opportunities to think about how we use lighting differently, whether track lighting on stairs to help reduce risks of falls, or changing the color temperature scale of lighting to help reduce behaviors associated with dementia. Smart lighting technologies can switch the lighting colors throughout the day to help with circadian rhythms and queuing. At Ctan, we are working now on creating a living lab, demonstration and testing facility that will be based at UNBC. This will allow us to help set up and test the fully integrated solutions, validate and adapt technology for a particular setting and its application. This will also serve as a space for raising awareness for tech and aging in rural and northern settings. We will have our formal launch on November 28th. And we have a really exciting, engaging keynote speaker who's a CEO of a major international technology firm who will speak to the benefits of partnering with us at Ctan to help expand technology accessibility to northern communities. We hope you'll visit our website, which is www.ctan.ca, and sign up to our mailing list. And that way we can be sure to send you an invite to our launch event. Thanks so much for listening to me, and I'm happy to take any questions now or during the networking time. Here on this slide, you can see my email contact as well as the Ctan web link, and I really welcome you to get in touch and collaborate with us and open up the discussions. We're happy to learn as much about you and happy to share about us.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and yet again, another example of the amazing innovation that is happening in the North. Aging is something that is impacting, all across the province, and the uniquenesses of being in the North addressing this. You're really leading the charge. I think that there is one of the uniquenesses. I think also is your rapid adoption of technology and looking for technology solutions. So that's amazing. If people are interested in partnering with you, we know within our ecosystem there are a number of companies that are working on digital health tools to address aging and other medical devices. Do they reach out to you directly?
Yeah, so please email me directly. My email is up there, shannon.freeman@unbc.ca, or they can also email us through our website. We have our email on there as well.
Okay. All right. Well, that's great. I hope to be able to attend your opening of the Living Lab. That looks really interesting.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to move on to our last speaker, Ann Woods. She'll be joining me. Oh, here she is. Ann is the Managing Director of LifeSciences and Healthcare Practice for the Silicon Valley Bank. She's based in Toronto. So thank you. I think you're most distant attendee at this event today. And she's responsible for leading the bank's efforts in this sector across Canada. She has 25 years experience in capital markets and life sciences. She began her career as a financial analyst and in 2005 went back to her roots in life sciences. Prior to joining Silicon Valley Bank, Anne served as a director for the Pangea Group, bringing insights and strategic direction to life sciences and healthcare clients. In 2018, Anne joined the board of one of our sister organizations, LifeSciences Ontario. She holds a BSc from McGill University and an MA from the University of Guelph, and she is also a CFA charter holder. Thanks to Anne's leadership, Silicon Valley Bank is our newest supporter of the LifeSciences BC Showcase Series. So it's great to have you with us, Anne, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks. Can everyone see my screen?
I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, that's great, because now all I can see is my screen. I can't see anybody's faces. So. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that introduction, Wendy. I really appreciate it. I'm really thrilled to be involved with LifeSciences BC. I know I guess I'm patting my own back when I say LSO does great work in Ontario, but I think LSBC takes it kind of to the next level where they really do some amazing work helping support early stage companies and have a really wonderful track record in doing that for many years. And so very much aligned with what we do at Silicon Valley Bank. So, we like to describe ourselves as being at the intersection of innovation and capital. So we're a bank, and just like any other bank, we provide banking services, but really our bread and butter is in the innovation economy. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of SVB, because not that many people in Canada have heard of us, and so I think it's probably worthwhile to do that. And then what I want to do is talk about how things have changed, in our new virtual world. So what's it like for an early stage life science company in Prince George to scale up now? Versus maybe 18 months ago. So I'll talk a little bit about venture capital fundraising and some of the do's and don'ts, and then I'll open it up for questions. So who's Silicon Valley Bank? So we are, as I said, we're the bank to the innovation economy. We've got 45 offices in 9 countries around the world. So, really anywhere that there's an innovation hub, you'll find a Silicon Valley Bank office. And I'm pleased to say that our most recent office opening happened, I think, 3 days ago, and it's Vancouver. So we now have officially set down roots in BC. So we're organized by pillar, and so that means there's a whole group of us that's focused on technology, and then my team, there's a whole group of us that's focused on life science and healthcare companies. And so we have over 4,000, early stage and scaling up life science and healthcare companies that bank with us. And because we've been around now for 35 years, we really have access to both influencers and investors, in a way that no other bank does. So over 3,000 venture capital and private equity firms actually bank with us, which is a really unique feature of the bank. So we've been coming to Canada, from our U.S. offices for somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 years. I think you'll probably recognize some of the companies on this slide. Some of them are based in the West. But we really didn't, kind of focus on the Canadian market until sort of, early 2019, where we got a banking license, and we're really here to do what we can to support the innovation economy. And so we just look at, how we work with life science and healthcare companies at SVB. The traditional banks don't really understand healthcare and life science research. They don't understand the, 10-year timelines, and, the fact that many of these companies, during the clinical process are not going to be making any money. And so that's something that we really clearly understand. And so, I guess the evidence of that jumped out to me on this slide is close to 2/3 of venture capital-backed healthcare IPOs in the past 3 years have at some point in time worked with Silicon Valley Bank. So enough of the commercial for SVB. I'll dive into the content. And so what I want to talk about a little bit is, what scaling up in the virtual world looks like. So, in many ways, there's lots of new challenges, but I think in some ways there's also some new opportunities. And so the world really looks different now. And I think there's three things that really kind of jump out at me especially when I think about my space in life sciences and healthcare. So, first of all, location has sort of lost its importance. And so when you think about the way that the world has gotten so much smaller, and the way people don't need to go to an office anymore, and the way investors are willing to have conversations with people in places that they normally wouldn't have wanted to travel to, we can really see the impact of that. And so those that have the experience working remotely or in remote areas and are ahead of the curve on the technology sort of runway, very much like what I've just heard in the previous presentations, are really at an advantage right now. And so I think this sort of, the new world is really kind of setting Prince George and the innovation that's coming out of Prince George up for success. We've all had to figure out new ways to interact and build trust. So at the beginning, back in March, we were like, well, you know what, no one's going to really want to do business or engage in research with someone that they've never met in person before. And, we're seeing that's, the reality is that that's changed. And so, the way we interact has changed. And I think that for a certain degree, that's going to continue to go on. And then finally, I think this slide shows is that, healthcare and life sciences really are the darling right now. So, in many cases we went, governments sort of seeing us, and I did a lot of consulting work in the big pharma space, and we were the real pain in the butt, always complaining and trying to, extract more money. Now we're, a little bit of the best friend that can provide solutions. And, this slide kind of shows the sort of interest that investors have with early stage companies. So this is, if you can imagine, of all the venture capital firms in the US that are solely focused on investing in healthcare and life science technologies, in the first half of 2020, these investors were able to raise $10.4 billion. We think that's going to get up to $15 billion by the end of the year. And what that means is there's going to be $15 billion of venture capital money looking for a home, looking for great technology to invest in over the next 2 to 3 years. And so that leaves us really, really hopeful for the sector. So I always like to show this slide for anyone that is thinking about, how they're going to scale up their company. So with that sort of framework in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about, how small and medium companies are accessing capital to, take that great research from the lab and commercialize it. And, 15 years ago, suggesting that we commercialize research in Canada was, to a certain degree, almost you sort of whispered that. You didn't get too confident about it. And now I think we're really seeing the benefits of the research that has been commercialized and how that money flows back into more research. And, to kind of steal the creative solution line from Heath's presentation, I think this, the scaling up and the commercialization really helps us keep coming up with, more and more creative solutions. And so, depending on the company, there's different things we can look at. So, in many cases, especially in the case of health tech companies, where the actual cost involved of developing the technology and writing the software, there isn't a huge amount of sunk cost that needs to go into that. You'll see a lot of those are really either, self-funded, family and friends, or, what we consider sort of, bootstrapping it. So you're able to develop the technology and bring it to market. And then, if we sort of go down to the other end, there's lots of really cheap debt financing options for early stage companies. So there's government programs in every province and federally that will provide, interest-free loans that will really help you kind of extend your runway and allow you to continue down the development pathway. And then, of course, self-servingly that, as you're, in the sort of, Series A kind of round, that's where, players like Silicon Valley Bank and other venture debt providers come in. And then, venture capital, what we're seeing there is, it used to be that you really had to have, a lot of traction and had to be sort of farther down the clinical pathway. We're seeing a number of venture capital firms. In fact, I would venture to say the majority of venture capital firms are now really, really focused on company creation and academic partnerships, and really getting in early with companies to help them scale up. But for small, really small enterprises that are just getting off the ground, Canada is an amazing place for grants. And so, when I started to do this presentation, I had a call with Wendy, and I was like, what should I be including in this? And Wendy said, we should talk about the challenges that rural small and medium enterprises face. And then I just reached out to my network and asked around. I know some people who do some work with rural companies across the country. And a really interesting thing came out about grants. There are lots of grants available. And I know, for example, in Northern Ontario, a lot of that grant money goes unspent because it is so hard to figure out what's available out there. There's no central spot, but there are certainly lots of consultants out there that can help you, that can help find grants. And there's all kinds of, it's not just money you can get from these groups. It's also things like, in-kind support. So whether that's strategic guidance or helping with business plans, you can get sort of, in-kind donations for investigational therapeutics. So if you're doing a head-to-head study, you can get someone to donate samples of one of the drugs. So there's lots of ways grants can really help at the early stage of a company. And so those are really the four kind of sources of capital. But what I wanted to kind of touch a little bit on is, what the best practices are. And it doesn't really matter whether you're looking for, an angel investor, a grant, venture capital firm, or debt. You really, really need to know your audience, and you've got to get absolutely clear on articulating why you're doing what you're doing. So, why you? Like, why are you the person you should be investing in? Why is this important now, and why this problem? And when I was listening to the first presentation, there was conversation around this. If you're applying for a grant from a group in Northern BC, you want to make sure that your grant application and that the work you're doing is going to benefit Northern BC. And the same is true if you're applying for a federal grant. So you want to be able to show how this is going to create jobs or how this is going to have downstream impact on the, sort of the overarching goals of the grant provider. And so that really, you need to think about, when you look at all the options for grants and for investors, you want to make sure you're not wasting your time. So, this goes to the qualifying your investors. So if you are in Northern BC, by all means, if you've got a key opinion leader in Alberta and there's work being done there that's going to benefit Northern BC, you could potentially be applying for grants in Alberta as well. So, keep an open mind. If you could be applying for a clean tech grant if what you're doing is going to be creating efficiencies in some way. So be creative, but make sure at the same time you're not wasting your time on investors that are not going to be interested in your technology. So make sure that they have a track record of your location, your sector, the size of check you're looking for. And I use the expression investment thesis here, but really it's what are the goals of whomever is providing the funding. And so the build a great deck is the last piece. So this is really build a great application, build a great deck. It's, there's really some key things that you need to focus in on. So what's the problem? What's the solution? Team is very important. Are these the right people to work on this solution? For, investors that are obviously looking for, a profit, they want to know what the market size is. Who's the competition? Is someone else doing the same thing as you? And how long is this going to take? Because the last thing you want when you're doing a grant application is to be going back in 3 years and saying we need more money. So you want to make sure you're really clear on the timelines. And one of my LSO board colleagues she does grant consulting. So I said to her, why don't you give me some of the most common mistakes that happen in the grant applications that you review? And so she provided me with this list, which I thought was great. But yeah, not being really like the first kind of group of them are really, it's too general. So you're not getting clear on what the tangible deliverables are. You're using statistics that identify a benefit for Canada or for a specific region, but it's sort of, very, very high level and broad, and you haven't dug deep enough into the details. I love this one is, you're getting, when you're supposed to provide support letters, what you're really just getting is love letters of people talking about how wonderful you are, but they're not speaking directly to your proposal and the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. And I think the other thing is, you guys are the experts, and don't assume that the people reviewing your application are experts. So again, this goes back to this concept of knowing your audience. And then I talked a little bit about making sure that you think about, what could be in kind and what is a cash contribution. So make sure that you've defined that. And then I think the only one last thing I want to share with you is, think about the opportunities that are in front of us now as we network. There is so many conferences, and many of them are really, really, were really, really, really expensive. And it was, everyone talks about the JP Morgan conference in San Francisco, which is ridiculously expensive to attend. It's never been so cost efficient to attend conferences. A lot of them are free now. You can dial in. And so the opportunity for conference networking has never been greater. Having said that, there are more opportunities for networking than there is time. So be choosy and don't spend all your time networking. The technology, so one of the things that LSBC did before this is we got online and we made sure the technology worked. Nothing is worse than you're trying to make a good impression and you can't get your technology to work. So understand all the different platforms and embrace them. And then I think, really importantly, some things about networking and pitching haven't changed, right? Be on your best behavior. Just because you're at home and on screen doesn't mean that you can, you should have a hoodie on and a mess in the kitchen in the background. I have a colleague who's had the same empty Starbucks cup on his shelf for, I think, 3 weeks. And so, be aware of what's going on in your background. And perhaps, what's maybe more important now than ever is, try to be as engaging as you can, because it's really easy for the person on the receiving end to get distracted because they can mute, they can turn off their camera. There's lots going on. And so, be as engaging, get your pitch deck right, get your energy up for networking. And then, I was thinking about this old joke about how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So, if you're not used to doing stuff on Zoom or WebEx, make sure that you rehearse in advance, because it's going to make a ton of difference when you finally get there. You're going to be a lot more relaxed and you'll get more out of the event. And with that, I'm happy to open it to questions.
Hi, Anne. Thanks. That was super. That was really interesting. And I think you've covered off both what's happening in the marketplace with attracting capital. Great discussion about grants, which I'd love to follow up with you on after. And some advice. I agree with you. We have found, or we've been trying to convince ourselves, or we found that being in a virtual world has created a lot of opportunities that weren't there before. Just the fact that you can attend from Toronto this event and hear of all of the amazing innovation that is happening in Prince George is an opportunity that wouldn't have existed. So I agree. I think we all need to look at this as a way to take advantage of virtual, because we don't know whether we will all return back to fully in person. I think it'll probably be a hybrid, but it's a great opportunity for people to broaden their reach with what they're doing and try and develop partnerships broader than they might have been able to before. So I think we're going to move to networking right now. So if you have any questions for Anne, please go meet her in her expo. As you saw at the beginning, there's tables around, and the Michael Smith Foundation, Silicon Valley Bank, UNBC, and Clinical Trials BC all have specific designated areas where you can reach out to them. Again, thank you to all of our partners. This has been a very interesting session, and I'm so impressed with what is happening in Prince George. I'm so sorry that we weren't able to be there in person, but really appreciate being able to learn about what's happening. In addition, this event has been recorded, so if you want to go back and review some of the speeches and presentations, you'll be able to get that off of our website. With that, our next showcase series is going to be in Kelowna in a couple of weeks. We have our Investor Summit next week, so if you haven't joined and you're interested in coming, please do so. The rest of our events are up on the screen, but I'm not going to go through them in the interest of time. They're also in our events newsletter. So with that, Ryan, I'll ask you to close off the stage and move us back into the networking lounge. Thank you, everyone.